My son put down his fork, looked at me from across the table, and said something I still can't believe came out of his mouth. "Dad, we've been talking, and we think it's time you moved your things to the garage apartment." He said it quietly, like he was suggesting I try a different brand of coffee. My daughter-in-law sat beside him, hands folded in her lap, watching me with those flat gray eyes that never quite warmed to anything. She didn't look sorry. She looked like she was waiting to see if the plan had worked. I'm 63 years old. I spent 35 years as a licensed electrical contractor in Portland, Oregon. I built my own company from the ground up, started with a used van and a bag of tools, retired with 12 employees, and more work than I could handle. I put my son through Oregon State. I paid for his wedding. I coached his Little League teams. And 8 months ago, I sat in a small room in a hospital in Beaverton and held my wife's hand while she stopped breathing. Her name was Carol. She was 61. Ovarian cancer. It was fast, which everyone said was a mercy. And maybe they were right. But fast doesn't mean it hurts less. It just means you don't have time to say everything you should have said. After Carol died, the house we had lived in for 22 years felt like a museum of everything I'd lost. Every room had a version of her in it. Her reading glasses on the nightstand, her handwriting on the grocery list still stuck to the fridge. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't eat. My son called every day for the first week, then every few days, then once a week. He was worried about me, he said. He and his wife wanted me to be closer. So when they came to me with the idea, I listened. "Dad, sell the house," my son said, his voice careful and kind in a way I should have recognized as practiced. "It's too big for one person. You're isolated out there. Come live with us. We'll find something bigger, pool our resources, get a place where you have your own space but you're not alone." His wife smiled her careful smile. "We'd love having you close, Robert," she said. She has always called me Robert. Never Dad. Never anything warmer. I told myself that was just her way. The Portland house Carol's and my house sold for $610,000. I kept $270,000 in savings. I put $340,000 into the new purchase as my share of the down payment. The house we found was a 4-bedroom colonial in Lake Oswego, $875,000. My son and his wife contributed $190,000 of their own money and financed the rest. The paperwork was clear. I owned 40% of the property. My attorney, a quiet woman named Sandra Holt, drafted a co-ownership agreement that spelled out every term. The main floor bedroom, the one with the bay window overlooking the garden, the one closest to the kitchen, and the main bathroom. That was mine. Non-negotiable. I was 63, with a bad hip. I wasn't going to be climbing stairs in the middle of the night. Sandra made sure it was written in plain language. My room, my space, my access to the shared areas of the home. I read every word twice. I signed with confidence. That was 6 months ago. I want to be very clear about what happened at that dinner table, because the way my son delivered the news matters. He didn't yell. He didn't apologize. He just put down his fork with a small click and said it like it had already been decided, like telling me was a courtesy and not a conversation. The garage apartment. I knew the space. It was above the detached garage at the back of the property, accessible by an outdoor staircase. It had been listed as a bonus room in the real estate brochure. I had been up there once, the day we moved in, helping carry boxes. It was unfinished. The floor was plywood. The ceiling followed the slope of the roof, which meant you couldn't stand upright in the corners. There was a single window facing the back fence. In mid-January in Oregon, garage apartment means 45 degrees, and exposed to the sound of the automatic door cycling open and closed every time someone came or went. "What's wrong with my room?" I asked. My voice was steady. That surprised me. My daughter-in-law leaned forward. She had a way of leaning forward when she was about to manage you. "Nothing is wrong with it," she said. "It's a beautiful room. That's actually exactly why we need it." She touched the side of her coffee cup. "My wellness practice is growing faster than we expected." I've been seeing clients in the dining room, but it's not appropriate. I need a dedicated space. A quiet room. Something professional. Your room has the garden view, the private entrance through the side door. She tilted her head slightly. It's really the only room in the house that works. Her wellness practice. She was a life coach. She had been doing it for about 14 months, charging people $200 an hour to tell them to breathe more intentionally and set quarterly goals. As far as I could tell, she had 3 regular clients and a lot of expensive candles. I looked at my son. He was studying the tablecloth. There are 3 other bedrooms upstairs, I said. The guest room is where I keep my equipment, she said smoothly. The second bedroom is my son's home office. He needs it for remote work. The small room in the back doesn't have a closet, so it can't be used for client sessions. She spread her hands as if the conclusion were simply mathematics. Your room is the only logical option. The agreement I signed said that room was mine, I said. Sandra Holt drew it up. It's part of the co-ownership terms. Something moved behind her eyes. She didn't like that I'd said Sandra's name. My son finally looked up. "Dad," he said, and there was an edge in his voice I hadn't heard since he was a teenager getting caught in a lie. "It's not like we're throwing you out. The garage just needs a little work and we'll do all of it. New flooring, a space heater, whatever you need." He exhaled. "We're asking you to be flexible. Just for a while." I said no. Quietly, the same way I'd said it my whole life when I meant it. My son set his jaw, and for a moment I saw something I recognized not from him, but from her. Her expression, her posture, her certainty that this conversation had already ended in her favor, just reflected in my son's face. "Dad," he said, and his voice had changed. Harder. "We're not asking anymore." I looked at him for a long time. Then I looked at his wife, who was watching me with the quiet patience of someone who has already won. "All right," I said. "Let me think about it tonight." That was the beginning. I didn't move to the garage apartment, not that night, and not the next week. But the air in the house changed after that dinner. My daughter-in-law moved through rooms with a new kind of ownership, touching things, rearranging things, measuring my doorway with a tape measure while I was still inside it. My son avoided my eyes. He left early and came home late. When he did speak to me, he used the careful tone you use with someone you've already decided to manage rather than talk to. I was watching. That's what they didn't understand. I had spent 35 years as a contractor. And a contractor's greatest skill isn't what's on the license. It's knowing how to read a job before it falls apart. You learn to see the stress fractures before they crack. You learn that the problem you can see is never the whole problem. Something was wrong in that house. More wrong than a life coach who wanted a better office. The first thing I noticed was the mail. My daughter-in-law had always been the one to collect it from the box at the end of the driveway. I'd never thought much about it. But one afternoon when she was out, I got there first. Mostly flyers and one bill. But there was also a thin envelope from a real estate investment firm I'd never heard of, a company called Meridian Property Group. It was addressed to her. Not to my son. I put it back. I didn't open it. But I remembered the name. The second thing I noticed was the phone calls. She took them in the garage, not in the house, not in the yard, specifically in the closed garage with the side door shut. Twice. In 1 week. Both times. At least 40 minutes. I am not a dramatic man. I don't draw conclusions without evidence. But I am also a man who spent 3 decades reading blueprints. And I know the difference between a load-bearing wall and decorative trim. Something in this house was carrying more weight than it was designed for. On a Thursday night, 3 weeks after the dinner table conversation, I couldn't sleep. The hip was bothering me, cold weather. Always, and I got up around 1 in the morning to get water from the kitchen. I moved quietly because I always moved quietly in that house now. It had become a habit, making myself small in a space I had paid for. I was at the bottom of the stairs when I heard her voice. She was in the dining room, sitting at the far end of the table, her back to the hallway, talking on her phone. Just a thin rectangle of dim light from her screen on the table beside her. I stopped in the shadow of the doorway. "I know the timeline is tight, but he doesn't know anything," she was saying. Her voice was low and quick, confident the way people get when they're sure they're alone. I've kept him completely focused on the old man's situation. That's bought us time. A pause. She was listening. No, he won't be a problem, she said. Once the listing is live, it moves fast. I've seen the comps. At ask price or better. We're looking at $920,000 after fees. He gets his buyout share. We divide, and I'm done. Another pause. No, I told you I'm not staying in Oregon. That was never the plan. My hand was flat against the wall. The issue is the deed, she said. Her voice dropped even lower. He's on it at 40%. I need his signature to transfer clean title. I've got someone who says it can be handled. I just need to find the right moment. A small, cold laugh. He's an old man living in our house. I'll find the right moment. I walked backward up the stairs in the dark, one step at a time, not making a sound. I lay on my bed in the room with the bay window and stared at the ceiling for a long time. She wasn't building a wellness practice. She wasn't building anything. She was planning to sell the house, my house, the house I owned 40% of, and she was talking to someone about forging my signature to do it. And she had kept my son pointed in the wrong direction the entire time, aimed at me like a tool, while she quietly built her exit. I thought about my son. I thought about his face at that dinner table, the way he had hardened into her certainty. How long had he been following her lead, without knowing where she was actually taking him? I didn't sleep. But something in me that had felt like grief and confusion for the past weeks had gone quiet and cold and completely clear. I knew exactly what was happening. Now I needed to know exactly how far it had gone. The next morning I called Sandra Holt. Sandra, I said, I need you to pull the co-ownership agreement, specifically Section 7. There was a brief pause. Section 7, she repeated. The transfer restriction clause. Robert, what's happened? I told her everything. The dinner table, the garage apartment, the envelope from Meridian Property Group. The phone call I had heard at 1 a.m. She was quiet while I talked, the silence of a lawyer thinking. Let me pull the file right now, she said. I heard the quiet sounds of her office, a drawer, the soft thud of a folder on a desk. Here it is, she said. Section 7. Restrictions on transfer and encumbrance. No co-owner shall sell, transfer, mortgage, refinance, or otherwise encumber the property, or any interest therein, without the prior written consent of all co-owners. Any attempt to do so, including any listing for sale, any executed purchase agreement, any application for financing, constitutes a material breach of this agreement. She paused. And then there's 7b. Read me. 7b. In the event of a material breach of Section 7, the non-breaching co-owner shall have the right to purchase the breaching co-owner's interest at the original contribution price. If the breaching co-owner refuses or is unable to complete the transfer within 60 days of written notice, the non-breaching co-owner's ownership interest shall automatically convert to a controlling 75% stake, with all management and disposition rights vested solely in the non-breaching co-owner. I let out a slow breath. I'd almost forgotten about the 75% clause. You insisted on it, Sandra said. Your exact words were, Sandra, I've seen too many handshake deals go bad. If someone breaks this, I don't want a lawsuit. I want the building. That was true. I had said that. I had said it thinking it would never be used. They haven't listed it yet, I said. But she's already in contact with a buyer, Sandra said carefully. And if she's discussing forging your signature, we may have exposure to fraud charges that go well beyond the civil agreement. A pause. I need you to find me something documented. I can do that, I said. I went to the hardware store that afternoon. I told my daughter-in-law I was getting weather stripping for the back door. Which was true. I did buy weather stripping. I also bought a small wireless camera, the kind used for package theft monitoring. I placed it on the bookshelf in the living room, angled to cover the dining room table. I ran the power cable flat behind the baseboard. I had done commercial wiring for 35 years. Hiding a single thin cable was nothing. That evening, I drove to a hotel downtown. I told my son I was visiting an old trade friend passing through town. He barely looked up from his laptop. For 2 days, the feed showed nothing useful. Ordinary mornings, ordinary evenings. I was beginning to wonder if grief had made me paranoid, if the phone call I'd heard was something more innocent than it sounded. Then Sandra called me on the second afternoon. I found Meridian Property Group, she said. Small operation. 4 properties on their portfolio. All flips. The principal's name, his last name, is the same as your daughter-in-law's maiden name. I was quiet for a moment. A relative, I said. Could be a coincidence, Sandra said, in the tone she used when she didn't believe something was a coincidence. That night, around 9 o'clock, the camera feed showed movement in the dining room. My daughter-in-law sat down at the table with her laptop and her phone. She made a call. I couldn't hear audio clearly, but I could see her face. She was animated, smiling. Then she picked up a piece of paper from a stack beside her laptop, held it up, and studied it. Set it down, took a pen, made a mark, lifted the paper again, made another mark. She was practicing a signature. I took a screenshot and sent it to Sandra with 3 words. Document everything now. Sandra sent the breach notice by certified mail and process server the following morning. I was sitting in a diner 2 blocks from the hotel, finishing my breakfast, when my son called. He called 4 times in 4 minutes before I picked up. Dad. His voice was something I hadn't heard from him since he was 16 and had put my truck into a ditch. Stripped down, scared, and very young. Dad. A man came to the door with papers. From Sandra Holt's office. What is this? He says you're invoking some breach clause. He says you're trying to take the house. I'm not trying to take the house, I said. My coffee was still warm. I'm protecting it. Maya is saying she doesn't know what this is. She says you're confused. She says you might be having some kind of... Sit down, son, I said. Go into another room. Close the door. And sit down. Are you doing that? A pause. The soft sound of a door closing. Your wife has been in contact with a real estate company run by a man who shares her family name, I said. She has been planning to sell our house without my knowledge, without my consent, and without your understanding of what the plan actually is. I have documentation. And last night I have camera footage of your wife practicing a forged signature, presumably mine, to clear the title. The silence was complete. I'm going to send you 2 things right now, I said. Look at them alone. Then call me back. I sent him the screenshot, my daughter-in-law at the table, pen in hand, paper raised, and the Meridian Property Group registration with the principal's name circled. I finished my breakfast. I left a good tip. I walked outside into the cold Portland morning. 20 minutes later, he called back. I asked her about the name, he said. His voice had changed again, flat, hollow, the voice of a man who has just watched a wall come down. She said it was a family friend, a business contact. I said okay. Then I looked up Meridian on my phone. A long pause. I asked her again. She said I was overreacting. She said, you'd gotten in my head. Another pause. Then, I showed her the picture. What did she say? She said the camera was illegal. She said this was your fault, that you'd been a problem since day one, that she'd been more than patient. His voice went quieter. She said she was glad she'd already made her plans. What plans? I said. Did she tell you? I asked her that same question, he said. And she told me. Dad. She told me all of it. Like she'd been waiting to say it out loud for years. The offer from her cousin. The timeline. The money. She said she was going to California. She said she'd been building toward it for 2 years. He stopped. She said you and I both have a talent for being used. I closed my eyes for a moment. And then she left, he said. She packed a bag, called a car, and walked out the front door. She didn't look back. I drove north, not back to Lake Oswego. I drove to a neighborhood on the east side of Portland, where a craftsman bungalow I had built from the foundation up 22 years ago, for a client who had recently passed away, was sitting on the market. His daughter had called me 3 weeks earlier. I hadn't been sure I was interested then. I was sure now. She showed me through the house in the gray winter light. I could see my own work in every corner, The tight joints in the wainscoting, the custom casements, the way the light moved through the kitchen window at the exact angle I had planned for. It was a house built with patience and care, and the intention to last. "I'll take it," I said. She blinked. "Don't you want to make an offer subject to inspection?" "I built it," I said. "I know what it is." I called Sandra from the car to start the wire transfer. Cash purchase. No delays, no contingencies. My phone vibrated the entire drive back. 11 missed calls from my son. A voicemail I listened to on speaker. Parked on a side street, with the engine running. "Dad." His voice was very quiet and very tired. "I've been sitting here for 2 hours. I keep thinking about the garage apartment. I keep thinking about how I talked to you at that dinner table and how I just went along with whatever she needed me to be." He exhaled slowly. I looked at our joint accounts. She's been moving money out for months. I don't know how I didn't see it. I think I just didn't want to look. A long pause. "I don't know what to do now, Dad. I have nothing. And I know I don't have any right to call you and say that. But I don't know who else to call." I sat there for a moment with the rain tapping on the windshield. Then I called him back. He picked up before the first ring finished. "I bought a house today," I said. "East Portland. 3 bedrooms. Good bones, I know. Because I built it myself." I let that settle for a second. "There's a room for you. A real room on the main floor, with a closet and a window that opens." He was silent for a long time. "Dad," he finally said, "after everything I let happen, the dinner, the garage, all of it, how are you?" He stopped. "Why would you do that for me?" "Because you're my son," I said. "But I need you to understand something before you answer." "Okay. This isn't forgiveness," I said. "Not yet. Forgiveness is something you build over time. What I'm offering is a starting point. You come here, you get yourself a job, I don't care what kind. Honest work is honest work. You contribute to the household. You sit across from me at that kitchen table a few nights a week, and you tell me the truth, even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard." I paused. "And you spend a long time thinking about how a man lets himself be aimed at his own father like a weapon, and what that costs, and why he let it happen." "Not so I can hear the answer." "So you know it." Silence. "I know," he said softly. "I've been asking myself that since she walked out the door." "Good," I said. "That's the foundation. You can build something on that." The breach settlement took less than 60 days. My daughter-in-law contested the camera evidence for 3 weeks, then stopped when Sandra quietly pointed out that the fraud documentation supported criminal charges that went considerably further than a co-ownership dispute. She accepted her $95,000 buyout and signed the paperwork without ceremony. My sons share the other $95,000 I didn't take. I had Sandra draft a repayment agreement instead. He would pay it back over 5 years at no interest, from his actual earnings. Not a gift, not a forgiveness. A debt acknowledged, a weight carried the right way. He arrived at the Craftsman house 3 days after I moved in. He came with 1 bag, which told me he understood the terms. He stood at the front door for a moment before he knocked, like he wasn't sure of his welcome. I thought that was probably the right instinct for where we were. I showed him the room, first floor, closet, window facing the backyard where 2 Douglas firs had grown big enough in 22 years to give real shade in summer. I showed him the kitchen, the backyard, where the tool hooks were in the garage. I made coffee, and we sat at the old round oak table that had followed me through 3 moves. The one Carol had refinished herself the summer our son turned 12. Neither of us talked for a while. The February rain did what February rain in Portland does steadily, without drama, turning everything clean and gray and quiet. "What do I do first?" he asked. "Not about the house, about everything." "Today you rest," I said. "Tomorrow you call the staffing agency on Burnside. You're a college-educated man, you'll find something. And you call your mother's sister in Medford, who hasn't heard from you since the funeral. That stops." He nodded slowly, looking at the table. I thought about Carol. I thought about the lakeside house and the grocery list I'd finally taken off the refrigerator on the day I packed. I thought about how grief can make a person's judgment go soft. How in the silence of a life cut in half, any voice that sounds like warmth can get you moving in the wrong direction. I had done that. My son had done it in his own way, with his own consequences. I was 63 years old. I had built structures for 35 years, and I understood one thing with complete certainty. The most dangerous buildings are the ones that look solid from the outside. The ones where the foundation was never right, where someone cut corners in the framing and painted over the problems. They hold until they don't. And when they go, they take everything with them. What we were building now here at this table, in this house I had made with my own hands, long before I knew I would ever need it, was something different. It was slower. It was less comfortable. It had no decorative finish over the structural work. But it would hold. My son washed the dinner dishes that first night without being asked. He went to bed early, and I could see the light under his door for a long time, which meant he was lying there thinking rather than sleeping, which seemed about right. Which seemed like exactly the right place to start. I sat alone in the living room with the rain still falling and my coffee going cold. And for the first time in 8 months, I didn't feel like a man waiting for something to be over. Here is what I know now that I didn't understand a year ago. Legal paperwork isn't a failure of trust. It's the proof that you understood what trust actually costs. When I had Sandra add that Section 7 clause to the co-ownership agreement, I was told I was being paranoid. I was told families don't need that kind of protection from each other. They were wrong. The clause didn't save the relationship. Nothing was going to save that relationship. But it saved me. It gave me something to stand on when everything else was gone. It gave my son a door to walk through when he finally came back to himself. That's the lesson. Not that family can't be trusted, but that the people who love you don't ask you to sign away your protection. And the ones who do, the ones who call legal safeguards insulting, who get quiet and cold when you mention your attorney's name, are telling you exactly who they are. Listen to that. Because this old man was paying attention. And this old man had put the right clause in the contract. So tell me, was I right to give my son that room? Or should a man who let his father be pushed out of his own home have to find his own way back? Let me know what you think in the comments below. And if this story meant something to you, hit that like button. You know why this channel is called what it is.